The community of Northridge, at its epicenter, was particularly hard hit. The shaking ruptured gas lines, sparking spectacular fires. For some, like Luisa Grimaldi, it seemed like the end of the world.
There was so much flame that I could feel the heat in my body. I could feel that my body was hot. I saw the houses burning, one to the next one. People screaming, crying, yelling for help. I thought, this is it. We are dying, and all this is gonna be on fire, and we are all dead. That's what I felt.
The shock produced near-record shaking, similar to Kobe, cutting off electricity to the area and shattering water lines. As the sun rose, the extent of the damage was clear.
It sounds like it's right here.
Buildings and parking structures had crumbled, trapping people beneath the rubble. Freeway bridges were ripped apart. One of the victims, a motorcycle policeman on his way to work in the dark, fell to his death when the bridge he was on suddenly disappeared. In all, 57 people died. 16 of them in this apartment building, where the bottom floor was so completely crushed that early rescue crews didn't notice the damage.
This place was snapped in 1 second. We heard an explosion, a big sound. It was not an earthquake, it was an explosion. That was the sound of all this thing coming off all their stilts all at one time from that big first jolt.
The apartment building had been 3 stories. But when the earthquake hit, the columns supporting the garage underneath shattered. The entire complex collapsed on top of those sleeping on the bottom floor.
You underneath that? Okay, right underneath here.
My husband witnessed several bodies in the bottom floor. One lady that was still alive when he first saw her, she was crushed about on her bed. There's about 2 feet of space and her beams on top of her.
Everyone who died in this building died for nothing, because this building should not have gone down on a 6.6.
Earthquake strike. It's the falling. In Kobe, the traditional houses with heavy roofs and light walls were a primary cause of death. Engineers in Japan are now using this hydraulic-powered shake table to test earthquake. Designed to hold structures weighing up to 1,000 tons, this device can simulate the way the ground moves during an earthquake. In Soviet Russia, scientists once cabled entire buildings to massive seismic machines to simulate the force of an earthquake.
3, 2, 1.
Dr. Tom Henye demonstrates an American shake table.
This experiment is illustrating what tall buildings might do under an earthquake shaking. Structures of different heights will vibrate more violently under certain conditions.
What the engineers learn is incorporated into new construction, like these freeway overpasses in Dr. Henye's hometown, Los Angeles.
We're passing underneath one of the newest and most impressive freeway interchanges in the world. It's built with modern engineering technology to prevent collapse.
But it isn't until an earthquake strikes that we learn how well the new designs actually work. The results can be alarming.
We learn something about how structures perform in every earthquake. The biggest surprise in Northridge was the discovery of damage to steel frame buildings.
Buildings constructed with steel beams and columns like these were believed to be earthquake-proof. But this recent laboratory test shows what can happen to their steel beams during a strong earthquake. Where the beam and column are welded together, stress from the shaking causes the joint to crack. It's a potentially disastrous problem that earlier laboratory tests failed to disclose.
We didn't know prior to Northridge that we had a problem with steel frame buildings. Now we do. And we're going to modify the code, and we're going to put into practice changes that will make those buildings safer.
Strengthening old buildings and retrofitting bridge columns with steel metal jackets are some of the methods used to keep structures from collapsing. But the technology doesn't come cheap. In poor developing countries, inferior materials and construction methods continue to claim lives. In 1970, a devastating earthquake struck the northern mountain region of Peru. The powerful shock flattened buildings made from adobe brick. Entire towns literally disappeared from the map. As bodies were lifted out of the rubble, the death toll climbed to some 50,000. Those who suffered the most were the poor, as is often the case in an earthquake.
We could construct buildings that were very resistant to earthquakes, but as the resistance to earthquakes and other hazards increases, so does the cost of construction. Where the level of acceptable risk lies is a policy issue that has to be resolved by government and the private sector. This is a tremendous dilemma in all societies that face a seismic hazard.
When a building collapses, rescuers face their own dilemma. How to save survivors who are trapped before time runs out. July 1990, a severe earthquake has hit the Philippines. Beneath the rubble of a collapsed hotel, survivors are trapped and fighting to stay alive. For rescue crews, time is critical.
Hold it! Hold it! Mayo! Mayo! He's that way. What's happening? This dust is getting good.
You've got oxygen limitations, the dust, dehydration, all of these aspects. The body, after a 24-hour period, starts to basically shut down, and the potential for survivability is less.
Mayo! Put your hand out. Okay, good. All right, there we go.
Each time an earthquake hits, desperate scenes like these are played out.
All right, let's go. One more. Let's go. Raise it up. Go.
Rescuers giving their all to save lives, often putting their own lives on the line.
All right, man. I'll be happy to you out, brother.
In this earthquake in the Philippines, a well-coordinated operation made the rescue effort a success. But 5 years earlier, in Mexico City, deadly mistakes cost many rescuers their lives. In a matter of seconds, the capital of Mexico was plunged into chaos. The earthquake and aftershocks that rocked Mexico City in 1985 were a major disaster. Hundreds of buildings were totally destroyed. Thousands of people killed. And hundreds more trapped.
The wall fell on top of me. I tried to protect myself, and a huge block came toward me. I tried to get out in 20 ways, but it was impossible. The only thing I saw was a horrible darkness. It took 26 hours for the rescuers to find me. Those hours seemed an eternity.
For rescue workers, the challenge that faced them was daunting.
I personally never imagined that I would see or experience anything that I saw or experienced in Mexico City. And as I looked around in every direction, all I saw was gigantic buildings in a heap of rubble.
Doug Kopp saw these scenes of devastation on television.
Small hammer can break weight and
He rushed to Mexico City to volunteer in the rescue efforts. He's been working disasters around the world ever since.
One Doug Kopp went to Mexico and a completely different person left. I dropped everything I planned to do with my life and completely changed course.
Despite the dedication of people like Kopp, many rescuers in Mexico paid a high price for their help.
There was a lot of uncoordinated rescue efforts that took place in Mexico City. Many people died. Many rescuers or would-be rescuers were killed as a result of unsafe rescue operations.
There was a problem of lack of people who had experience, because up until the Mexico City earthquake, no international team really went anywhere to get any experience.
191 survivors were pulled from the rubble. As many as 100 rescuers were killed.
We learned a lot from that particular event. In fact, it was the Mexico City earthquake that got us to refine the development of an urban search and rescue response system.
The system would prove critical in Southern California. When disaster struck Northridge, California, highly trained rescue units went into action. The most urgent effort was to save a man named Salvador Peña.
He sounds like he's right here.
Firefighter Isidro Miranda was gravely concerned for Peña.
When I first saw how he was trapped, there was a little bit of skepticism because I had not communicated with him at that point, and all we could hear were moans.
3 floors of a concrete parking garage were on top of Peña, pinning him inside of his truck.
He was saying, please, please, help me. Please help me get out. And then he would make reference to, Dios, me ayude. God, please help me. Help me get through this.
As rescue crews drilled on top of the rubble, Miranda and another crew tunneled below. No one knew how long Peña could hold on.
He was in severe distress, and he was in fear for his life.
Then suddenly, Peña grabbed Miranda's hand.
He was still able to recognize that we were there, and by him being able to squeeze my hand, we felt like we had a chance to rescue somebody who was facing catastrophic disaster.
But the rescuers faced their own dangers. Aftershocks threatened to further collapse the structure. The crews labored 7 long hours, breaking up the concrete and dismantling Peña's truck. Finally, the moment they'd waited for.
At that moment, everybody felt like we had won a championship game, a battle of some sort. It was a great feeling at that time. It still is.
I feel very content, very happy to have a new life. First, because of God. Second, because of the help that came from the rescue teams in this country.
Peña was lucky in more ways than one. The collapsing beams that fell on top of his truck created a void space that saved his life. It's what rescuers look for after an earthquake.
When I search a building and I crawl through a building, I crawl through space. And if somebody was in that space, they wouldn't be hurt. Voids are found next to large, bulky objects. The bigger the object, the stronger the object, the less it compacts, the bigger the space is going to be.
When the concrete falls or the material falls down, it tends to fall up against these items. The piece of concrete will come down and be bent over like this, and under here will be a survivable space, what we call a void space.
But finding these spaces can also be dangerous. Fiber optic cameras like this are a critical tool. It's what firefighters use to locate victims after the Northridge earthquake.